Story 1. I used to be a night shift security guard at a small industrial complex out in the rural part of town. It wasn't the most exciting job, mostly just sitting in a booth, watching the camera feeds, doing the occasional patrol around the empty buildings. But it was quiet, and that's what I liked about it. The place was isolated, surrounded by woods on 3 sides, with a single road leading in and out. No one ever came out there at night, which made the job easy. Until one night, something did. It started like any other shift. I clocked in at 10 p.m., grabbed a cup of coffee, and settled into my routine. The first few hours were uneventful, just me and the hum of the monitors. Around 1 a.m., I got up for my first patrol, flashlight in hand. I always hated that part of the job, not because I was scared, but because the buildings were so damn quiet. The echoes of my footsteps made it sound like someone was always just behind me. As I walked between the empty warehouses, something caught my eye, a flash of movement near the fence line, out by the woods. It was quick, like someone ducking behind a tree, but I couldn't be sure. I stopped, shining my flashlight in the direction of the movement. The beam cut through the darkness, but there was nothing there, just the swaying branches and the rustle of leaves in the wind. I shrugged it off, figuring it was probably an animal, a deer maybe. We got those sometimes, wandering in from the woods. I finished my round and went back to the booth, but something about that flash of movement stuck with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen something, or worse, someone. An hour later, I saw it again, this time on the cameras. One of the feeds, the one pointed at the rear fence, flickered for a second, and in that brief moment, I saw a figure. Tall, thin, standing right at the edge of the fence, almost blending in with the trees. My heart started racing. No one was supposed to be out there. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to make sense of what I'd seen, but the figure was gone. Just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished into the darkness. I rewound the footage, scanning every frame, but there was nothing unusual, just that single flicker like a glitch. I told myself it was nothing, just a camera malfunction, but my gut was telling me otherwise. Something wasn't right. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out to check the fence line. As I walked toward the back of the complex, the silence was overwhelming. The only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath my boots. When I reached the fence, I scanned the area with my light, but there was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. I was about to turn back when I heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping, like someone gently knocking on metal. I froze, my flashlight beam darting around, trying to find the source of the noise. There was again, tap, 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 coming from the other side of the fence. Slowly, I walked toward the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the fence, I saw it, something pale and thin, reaching through the chain link. A hand. My blood went cold. It was just hanging there, limp and lifeless, the fingers curled slightly like it was trying to grab something. I backed away, barely able to breathe, when suddenly the hand moved. It gripped the fence, the fingers tightening around the wire. My mind was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, staring in horror as the figure began to pull itself up from the other side. It was tall, unnaturally so, its body impossibly thin and twisted, like it had been starved for months. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could hear its breathing, raspy, shallow, like it was struggling to draw in air. It slowly lifted its head, and for a moment I saw its eyes. They were wide, hollow, and completely black, like deep, endless pits. That was enough to snap me out of my paralysis. I turned and ran as fast as I could, my feet slipping on the gravel as I sprinted back toward the booth. I could still hear it behind me, the soft scrape of its hand against the fence, that horrible, shallow breathing growing louder. I slammed the door shut and locked it, fumbling for the radio to call for backup. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the words out, but finally, I managed to explain what had happened. The dispatcher tried to calm me down, saying they'd send someone out, but I wasn't waiting. I kept my eyes glued to the monitors, half expecting to see that thing climbing over the fence, but the cameras were clear. That's when I heard the knocking. Talp, talp, talp. It was coming from the door of the booth. Slowly, I turned to face the door, my heart thundering in my chest. There through the small glass window I saw it. That same hand, pale and bony, tapping lightly on the glass. My breath caught in my throat as the thing's face appeared, pressed against the window, its black eyes staring straight at me. I backed away, my mind racing. There was no way out. The door was locked, but I knew it wouldn't hold. The thing's fingers scraped against the glass, slowly, like it was savoring the moment, drawing it out. I grabbed the only weapon I had, a heavy flashlight, and held it in front of me, though I knew it wouldn't do much. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds, everything went dead quiet. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, the thing slammed its hand against the window, the glass rattling in its frame. I flinched, nearly dropping the flashlight, but the glass held. I stared at it, watching as it pressed its face harder against the glass, those eyes boring into mine. Then, without warning, it turned and disappeared into the night. The cops showed up about 10 minutes later. They found me in the booth, shaking, barely able to speak. They searched the grounds, combed through the woods, but they didn't find anything. No sign of the thing, no footprints, nothing. The cameras didn't catch anything either, like it never even happened. I quit the next day. I didn't care about the paycheck or the job. All I knew was I wasn't sticking around to see if that thing came back. To this day, I still don't know what I saw. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me after too many nights alone in the dark. But every time I drive past that complex, I swear I can feel those eyes on me, watching, waiting for me to come back. Story 2. This one happened to me a few years back when I was still living in a small, quiet town in upstate New York. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, sleepy, safe, and practically untouched by time. But after what I experienced, I realized that safety is an illusion, and you never truly know who's out there, watching. I had just bought a house on the edge of town, nestled near a dense patch of woods. It was perfect for someone like me, peaceful, a little isolated, but close enough to civilization that I didn't feel completely cut off. The only thing that gave me pause was the fact that the previous owner had left in such a hurry. The real estate agent didn't give any details, just mentioned they'd moved unexpectedly. I figured it was a job transfer, a family emergency, something normal. For the first couple of weeks, everything was fine. The house was cozy, the neighbors polite, though distant. Most of the time, it was just me and the quiet. At night, you could hear the wind rustling through the trees, the occasional owl calling in the distance. It was peaceful, until it wasn't. One night, I was sitting in the living room, flipping through channels on TV when I heard a faint knock. At first, I thought it was just the wind rattling the windows, but then it came again. 3 soft, deliberate knocks. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was almost midnight. I walked over to the door, cautiously peering through the peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty, the yard still. I opened the door a crack, half expecting to find a package or a stray animal. But there was nothing. I stepped outside, scanning the area. But the night was quiet, the darkness stretching out endlessly beyond the dim glow of the porch light. Must have been the wind, I told myself, though I didn't believe it. The next night, it happened again. 3 soft knocks, almost hesitant but insistent. This time, I didn't bother opening the door. I just stared at it, my pulse racing, a sinking feeling growing in the pit of my stomach. Something wasn't right. For the next week, the knocking continued. Same time, same soft, eerie rhythm. Always 3 knocks. I started to dread nightfall, knowing what was coming. But every time I looked through the peephole, there was nothing. No one. One night, after another round of knocking, I decided to stay up and watch, determined to catch whoever or whatever was doing it. I sat in the dark, waiting, my eyes fixed on the front door. Midnight came, and with it the knock. My heart leaped into my throat, but this time I didn't go to the door. Instead, I went to the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of someone sneaking away. What I saw chilled me to the bone. There was a figure standing at the edge of my yard, just barely visible in the glow of the streetlight. It was tall, unnaturally thin, its face hidden in the shadows of a hooded jacket. It didn't move. It just stood there staring at the house, staring at me. I was sure of it. I could feel its eyes on me, even from that distance. I backed away from the window, my skin crawling. Who the hell was that? And why hadn't I seen them before? I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but when I looked out again, the figure was gone. For a few days after that, the knocking stopped. I thought maybe it was over, that I'd scare them off. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. And I was right. A week later, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps outside my window. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching through the gravel path that lined the side of the house. My blood ran cold as I realized they were heading toward the back door. I shot out of bed, adrenaline pumping, and grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed. I crept downstairs, trying to stay as quiet as possible, my heart pounding in my ears. When I reached the kitchen, I could see the silhouette of someone standing just outside the back door, their face pressed up against the glass, staring in. My breath caught in my throat as I saw their eyes, wide, unblinking, and empty. There was something horribly wrong with them. It was like looking into the eyes of a mannequin, lifeless, but with a twisted intensity that made my skin crawl. I don't know how long we stood there, me frozen in place, and them just watching. And then, slowly, they raised a hand and knocked. 3 soft taps, just like before. I don't remember making the decision to run, but the next thing I knew, I was out of the house, sprinting down the road toward my neighbor's place, my phone clutched in my hand. I called the police, barely able to get the words out through my panic. When they arrived, they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. The back door was still locked, and there was no one in sight. I didn't stay in that house much longer after that. I couldn't. The knocks never came back, but that figure, those eyes, I see them every time I close mine. The house is still there, I think. No one's moved in since. I don't know what the previous owner saw or why they left so suddenly, but I have a feeling it was the same thing that came knocking for me. Story 3. I'm going to tell you a story, one that haunts me to this day, something I've only shared with a few people. It happened about 5 years ago, during a hiking trip in the vast wilderness of northern Montana, in Glacier National Park. I'd always been an avid outdoorsman, drawn to the stillness of the woods and the challenge of surviving in nature's embrace. But that trip, it changed something inside me. It made me realize that some places aren't meant to be disturbed, that nature hides secrets that we're not supposed to uncover. The day started like any other. I've been planning a solo hike to the Hidden Lake Trail for months. It was a popular spot, but I knew the deeper you went, the more isolated it became. There were rumors of missing hikers, strange sightings, but I shrugged them off. People always go missing in national parks. It's vast, unforgiving terrain. Most of the time, they're just unlucky. That's what I thought, anyway. The first few hours were uneventful. The sun was high, the air crisp with that unmistakable scent of pine. I didn't see a soul for miles, which was exactly how I liked it. I was about 3 hours in when I came across something strange. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. There was a clearing up ahead, but the grass was dead, completely brown and brittle, like it had been scorched by something. Odd, but not impossible. Wildfires happen, right? What made it unsettling was the silence. I don't know if you've ever been deep in the woods, but it's never completely quiet. You always hear something. Birds whine through the trees, the rustling of leaves. But here, nothing. It was like the whole forest had stopped breathing. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the air pressing against my skin, and that's when I saw it. There was something hanging from a tree at the far end of the clearing. I walked closer, slowly, my footsteps sounding too loud in the eerie quiet. It was a jacket, a red one, weather-beaten and torn, hanging from a low branch. I recognized it instantly. It was the same jacket I'd seen in one of those missing persons posters tacked to the park entrance, the one for that kid who'd vanished a year ago. They never found his body. The search teams eventually gave up, blaming the terrain, maybe a wild animal, or he just wandered too far. My heart started pounding in my chest, and I had that cold, creeping sensation like something was watching me. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to turn around and get the hell out of there. But I couldn't. Something else had caught my eye, a trail of footprints, leading deeper into the woods, far beyond where the path should have ended. They weren't fresh, but they were distinct. They looked like they'd been there for a while, and they didn't belong to a hiker. They were barefoot. I don't know what possessed me to follow them, but I did. Maybe I thought I could solve the mystery. Maybe I was just curious. But as I ventured deeper, the forest began to change. The trees were gnarled and twisted, their branches stretching unnaturally toward the sky like skeletal arms. The air grew colder, and that sense of being watched only intensified. My breath was shallow, and every step felt heavier, like something was pulling me back, warning me to stop. That's when I heard it, a low whisper, just on the edge of my hearing, like the wind had learned to speak. "Help me." It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. My blood ran cold. I froze, my mind racing, trying to convince myself that I hadn't heard anything, that it was just the wind, just the isolation messing with my head. But then it came again, louder this time. "Help me." I turned slowly, my heart in my throat, and there, standing just at the edge of the trees, was a figure. It was small like a child, but its face, I couldn't make it out. It was blurred, indistinct, like looking at something through frosted glass. But the voice was clear now, pleading. "Please help me." I should have run. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn and sprint back the way I came, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the sight of this thing, this figure that seemed to flicker in and out of existence like a faulty signal. And then it moved, jerking toward me in a way that was completely unnatural, its body bending at impossible angles. It didn't walk. It twitched, like a puppet with broken strings. That's when I finally broke free of whatever had been holding me, and I ran. I didn't look back, not once. The whispers followed me, growing louder, more insistent, until they weren't just whispers but screams, desperate, agonized screams. "Don't leave me." I don't remember how long I ran, but I didn't stop until I burst out of the forest, back onto the main trail. My lungs were burning, my legs felt like lead, but I didn't care. I just kept moving away from that place, from whatever the hell I'd just seen. When I finally reached the ranger station, I told them everything, but they didn't believe me. They said the trail had been closed for months due to dangerous conditions, that no one had been back there since the last search for the missing boy. I've never been back to Glacier since. Every once in a while, I'll dream about that clearing, about the jacket and the twisted trees. And sometimes, just before I wake up, I'll hear that voice again, whispering from the darkness. "Help me." I'll never know what I really saw out there. Maybe it was the boy, maybe it was something else. But I do know one thing. Not everything in those woods is meant to be found. Sometimes the scariest things aren't what we imagine or make up in our heads. They're the moments that sneak up on us in the dead of night, when we least expect them. Whether it's a strange figure at the edge of the woods or an eerie knock on the door, it's the unexplained that leaves us wondering. And the truth is, we may never fully understand what we've encountered. Sometimes it's better that way. So, next time you hear something strange in the night, or catch a glimpse of something just beyond the shadows, ask yourself, are you really alone? If you've had a chilling experience like this, share it. You never know. Someone else might have seen it too.